again in America, that's the time every 4 years when the somnambulists among us awaken momentarily and notice that there are 2 selections. That's what they seem to see on the ballot. And so very little around the edges seems to get noticed. And one of the biggest things that's been going on in this country since its inception is, of course, election fraud. And in the last decade and a half, election fraud has become arguably even more significant. And even though it's been documented, and it continues to be documented, and it's of course documented even more in Greg Palast's new book, it doesn't seem to break into the consciousness of the American voter. And of course, these types of events, we hope that will get out far and wide enough so people begin really critically thinking about the system that we have in our purported democratic republic to maybe activate them for real change.
He loves the people that he reports about, and he's devoted by his reporting, i.e. information as knowledge, to protect them by reporting about their plight, about the impact of the latest political, whether it's however corporate, governmental destruction of human life of people. Greg is there for that. He's special. He does the right thing. He nails the truth. And then he takes out a sledgehammer and makes sure that everybody sees what that truth looks like.
You know, I gotta tell you, when I wrote a story back in 2000, I don't even know, watching all these black people come in front of cameras and they said they couldn't vote. And I thought, ooh, there's some, maybe some computer program wiping out black voters off the voter rolls. And then when I found the program and put it on the top of BBC Nightly News, and everybody said, oh my God, this is going to change the election. The Supreme Court hadn't acted. And so it was on it was on the top of Nightly News and written the front page of Guardian newspapers all over the world. How the election had been stolen by removing black people from the voter rolls of Florida, and in the United States it was on channel nowhere, except for, I got this call from this crazy guy in San Francisco who put me on the air and said, what is this story? I knew that was the end of his career. Dennis Bernstein is a San Francisco Berkeley treasure, but I'm not going to let you keep him. We're taking him national, and I want people to know this, that starting next week, we're going to be doing a national broadcast for Pacifica of Billionaires and Ballot Bandits Pacifica broadcast, because we need to get his word, his information. Bob Perry, some terrific people. Robert Knight. We're going to tell you what's going on. I hope I'll be joining him. What an honor. See, he'd been sent a subpoena by federal investigators who wanted to know about mailing lists. Christian Coalition is a not-for-profit charity. Okay? The money's for higher purposes, right? And they had a list of 3 million names which somehow got used for another purpose. To create voter guides for churches, which would push, not too subtly, the candidacy of George Herbert Walker Bush, which is interesting because the chairman of the Christian Coalition, Dr. Reverend Pat Robertson, just a couple months earlier said that George Herbert Walker Bush was the unwitting tool of Satan. But Satan needed a word. The thing is illegal. It's crime to take money from the Lord and give it to a bush. Why? Why? Well, was it for, what was the purpose? To sell the Lord to the Lord and to the believers? No. election theft, of course, because it's illegal way to end an election, to say that the wards endorsed someone. But what Robertson did, okay. See, what I want to explain is that no one, the reason this book that I've written is called Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, is that no one steals votes to steal an election. No one steals votes to steal an election. They steal votes to steal the money. Reverend Robertson does not like being called Reverend Robertson. I know that because when I went to go visit him, I do remember his words very clearly because I have my cigarette lighter with me. Now, I don't smoke, I have asthma, so the cigarette lighter happen to have a tape recorder inside. He doesn't like to be called Reverend, he likes to be called Doctor because he says, I'm not a televangelist, I'm a businessman. Charles Taylor seized the presidency of Liberia. And the Reverend Dr. Businessman Pat came to him and said, I know you've done evil things, and I will offer you absolution. By the way, can I have a diamond mining concession? Taylor was accused of running illegal diamond mining, but whose diamond mines were they? Dr. Pat Robertson. Okay. Who then went to George Bush and asked Bush to be kind to the dictator, murderer, Charles Taylor. Because there's a lot of diamonds in God's kingdom. Now, why am I telling you this? Back to Dr. Pat's list and the gun. See, Judy Liebert gave me this information. She's letting me use her name. She was the chief financial officer. And when there was a subpoena, she went through their records and started pulling out the evidence which would put Dr. Pat and Christian Coalition Ralph Reedy, president, into the Who scout until the next century or thereafter. And Ralph started taking papers, the evidence against him, Reverend, and throwing them on the floor, having them shredded. And she said that seemed like an un-Christian. And when she mentioned that, and didn't take the suggestion of pulling the trigger, they fired her. And they tried to bribe her with $50,000 to shut up, and she wouldn't. She didn't think that was Christian either. What's this about? So I talked to the Reverend. And the first question I asked him was, you ran for president. You said God told you to run for president. The Lord himself told you to run for president. How could you lose with a campaign manager like that? And he said, the Lord told me to run. He didn't tell me to win. And what I've got is a list of 3 million names, and no one will ever be elected from the Republican Party without coming to me. And that's true today. And those who stray end up like Rick Santorum with their sleeves ripped off their sweaters. What's changed? What's changed? Today, Ralph Reed is not in prison. Today, Ralph Reed is running the Mitt Romney evangelical operation with a list of 17 million names that he is sending voter guides to. 17 million names and 17 million voter guides which will go to 25,000 churches to tell you that the Lord has picked Paul Ryan for you. And now it's legal. Completely. By the way, one of Robertson's lieutenants said that he never saw him pick up a Bible or pray unless a camera was on, except for one time when they were taking planes that were originally meant to take food to Rwanda and they took them to the Congo, filled with Pat's diamond mining equipment to his Congolese diamond mines. And Pat asked everyone on the plane to pray for diamonds. You know, we've been talking about Citizens United. And I'm going to tell you which citizens were united, and it ain't pretty. But there's another decision that went with it that no one seems to know. It's called SpeechNow.org. And Republican National Committee versus FEC, which said that charities may politic as much as they like. Okay? That the Lord may donate as much as he wants, or at least what you can steal out of his collection plate. It's changed everything. And it means that there are charities which can now charitably help us vote, including one called American Crossroads. American Crossroads is run by a guy that George Bush gave the nickname to, named after a flower, Texas flower called Turd Blossom. Karl Rove, also known as Bush's brain, so you know what Bush's brain is. Rove, as people say that he runs a big super PAC. No, he runs a charity. It's a charity called Crossroads, GPS. It is a charity under the IRS code, and that way, and charities, you don't have to say who gave you the money or where it came from. They're not Democrats or Republicans. I know, for example, there's some subtitle. It's Greg Palast investigates the Coke gang, Karl Rove, and their buddies. Now, I know many think, oh, okay, yeah, the billionaire Republicans. No. David Koch is going to run for governor of Kansas as a Democrat. He ran against Ronald Reagan for president, calling Reagan, he did, a third party, calling Reagan the left-wing socialist. But, you know, it's been very helpful. Where did Bill Clinton come from? You know, how do you become president from Dog Patch, Arkansas? Suddenly he rose up, and the steed on which he rode to the Oval Office called the Democratic Leadership Council, kind of an anti-FDR wing, the kind of anti-Democratic Party wing of the Democratic Party. This right-wing Democratic Party group, which put Clinton in, was created by a $100,000 donation from Charles and David Koch. By the way, last Friday, I went to Hilton for breakfast with Mitt Romney and 37, a group he had of 37 billionaires. I kid you not, I didn't have my checkbook with me. 37 billionaires in a group called Restore Our Future. For those who came to my last talk for KPFA, I had a book out called Vulture's Picnic. The Vulture. Now, who was hosting the breakfast? The Vulture, Snake Paulson, Iceman Simmons. I don't give any of these names. They're happy bankers do. Okay? They get these Dick Tracy evil names to scare you. And I hope by the end of the evening you'll be pretty scared. Because these guys are guys in the book. Now, what do? Let's go back a bit again. Back to 2000, and that story that Dennis cracked open the Berlin Wall to let me tell it in the United States. Okay. 94,000 people targeted called felons in Florida. People who can't vote, evildoers, bad people, like Willie Steen, a Gulf War veteran, who takes his 5-year-old son to the polling station to show him how democracy works, and the kid got a real lesson because he said, your dad's a criminal, he can't vote. Never got a parking fine. Really. Gulf War veteran. Can vote. Afterwards, by the way, after I wrote the story, by the way, in case you wonder, out of the 94,000 people on the list, the number that were innocent legal voters out of that list, because when the Times did report the story 4 years later, they said the list was flawed. Yeah, it was flawed. Exactly 100% of the names on the list were legal voters. 100%. We went through the list with the Attorney General, who said if there's a single bad voter, he would arrest them. And he didn't arrest anyone because there was no one. But none of them voted. Willie Steen got a letter of apology from Katherine Harris, and in 2004 they stopped him from voting again as a criminal. Now, how? Because they use databases. It's a data mining system in which they make matches. They take big databases, they look for the felons to knock off the list. In Willie Steen's case, there was a guy named Willie Osteen, with a little kind of Irish O thingy on the top. Willie Osteen committed a crime in Ohio. Willie Steen, black man in Florida, lost his vote. Now, when I say black people lost their vote, I'm not guessing. In the Florida voter rolls, take a look at the sheets of the felon who purges here in Florida. It says BLA next to their names. They're not guessing either. They know it's a kind of drone system. They see BLA, gone. Those were the battle days under Catherine Harris, right? By the way, the guy that came up with that list, this guy named Ken Langone, he was having breakfast with Romney and the Vulture last Friday too. Worth several $billion. They don't, and Langone said, and he said this, and I do appreciate it saying this. I don't support candidates. I'm not supporting Romney. I'm making an investment. He said, I evaluate Romney like I would any other investment. What's my return? And that's what scares me. What is his return? He gave those lists to get Bush in, not because he wanted to steal an election, but because Elliott Smith was charging him with insider trading. It was get rid of the black folk or he goes to jail. He was buying the badge. You steal an election, you steal the cops. The 37 billionaires were there for breakfast. Obviously the Vulture, they were eating a carcass, and the question was, who was on the plate? Okay? And the answer was, you. They were creating something called data trust, a data mining system again. Now, much more sophisticated than Langone's MP one. This is better. But that's not enough. The Koch brothers are really jealous, so they came up with something called Venus, another data mining system. And the Vulture made them promise to work together. Aren't you happy? Now, you put Venus together with data trust, and you now have 22 million names purged from the voter rolls in the last 2 years. Now, where does Greg Palast get this? We have something called the Elections Assistance Commission of the United States. U.S. Elections Assistance Commission, which has this data. It says 22 million voters purged in the last 2 years. This is not, when I say investigative reporting, it's called investigative edition. It's like the great investigative reporter Yogi Berra said, it's amazing what you can see when you're looking. It's not reported. Okay, I'm going to give you some other numbers from the United States Elections Assistance Commission. I used to teach statistics in another life. And just here, I'll give you some numbers. 767,023 provisional ballots cast and never counted. 1,451,116 ballots spoiled, not counted. Spoiled. 480,136 absentee ballots mailed in, not counted. 2,383,587 would-be voters had their registrations rejected for, I know where to count. Remember I talked about Florida, heat of the night, Dixie, of course, they go after black folk and dark-skinned folk, not like Surf City, California. Secretary of State McPherson, when he was Secretary of State Republican. Do you know that you have fewer Latinos registered here than you did 4 years ago? Same with African Americans. What's happened? What happened? You haven't did these voter drives. What happened to the voter drives? Didn't you go to rock the vote and sign up? Didn't you go to your church and sign up? Didn't you see all those parades? The answer, 42% of the forms sent into the state of California and the counties were never put on the voter registries. Why? 42%! I mean, Catherine Harris she's just jealous. She's Thomas Jefferson compared to what McPherson did in California. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wrote the introduction to Billionaires and Ballot Bandits because we started out the book as an article we wrote for Rolling Stone. And he also wrote a chapter here. And so he and I called up Deborah Bowen, who's Democratic succeeded, said, what's this 42% now of the voter rolls? Said, McPherson said they had unusual names. Suspect names. So I said, what's a suspect name? She said, Muhammad, She said hyphenated names like Garcia Marquez, you know, Hispanic names, Filipino names, Asian names, you know. None of the names he'd ever seen at the club. Nearly a million voters lost their vote. This is California. Florida ain't have nothing. If you're African American, the chances your vote will be spoiled, cast not counted, is 900% higher than if you're white. If you're Latino, 500% higher. If you're Native American, that's a really important demographic. It is, because they're concentrated in those swing states like Colorado, Nevada. Their numbers are horrific. And by the way, that's a higher Democratic voting demographic than African Americans. They know who they're taking out. Okay? So it's race. Apartheid polling is back. It's just that Jim Crow is now James Crow data analyst. Okay? This is what's happening. Themis, data trust. That's what's going on in America right now. Welcome to America. Now, there are 9 ways that they steal the elections. There's nine ways. Purging, spoiling, prestidigitizing, rejecting your absentee ballot, tossing a provisional ballot. What the hell is a provisional ballot? Okay, if you show up, if Philistine shows up now, and they say, you're a criminal, he says, no, I'm not. They give you, they say, well, then fill out this provisional ballot. See, because Karl Rove set up a system under the Help America Vote Act, you know how he likes to help you vote, under the Help America Vote Act, which says you have the right to a provisional ballot if your name has been wrongly purged. Congressional Black Caucus got that after my reports. They got the right to it. So you have a right to a provisional ballot. You don't have a right to have it counted. Don't take a provisional ballot. Okay? It's a way to get you out of the polling booth, okay? So that's one of the games. But how do they do this stuff? Okay. What do you do? What are you doing? Why do they have data trust and themes? What are they going to do? Well, one is caging. Send a letter to you. Welcome, voter. Welcome, BLA voter. Okay? And then, but if it's sent to your registration address, it comes back undelivered because they write do not forward. It goes back and it goes into what they call a physical cage. Okay, physical cage. And then they add them all up. They've already done this, tens of thousands of voters. Hundreds of thousands of voters now are coming up. And they say they're fraudulent voters and they challenge their votes. Okay, well, hey, you're not at your registration address. It all makes sense to me, right? Does it? Wait, where did they send them to? Where did they send them to? Well, they sent them to, in August, they sent them to some traditionally black colleges where the students were, on vacation. Naval Air Station, Naval Air Station, Naval Air Station, Naval Air Station, Naval Air Station. These letters are sent to soldiers, active duty soldiers, but what came back? They're not at their base, so they're obviously fraudulent voters. This is done under contract with the Republican National Committee. I talked to a voter, he said, I got to vote, the guy on the list. He said, I got to vote. I said, my vote from overseas. I said, was it counted? What? No. See, it's challenged. You know, it's a perfect crime. You mail in your vote from Afghanistan, an active duty soldier, and it's challenged. You don't even know it. Don't, by the way, mail in your ballot. Don't go postal if you can at all avoid it. 1/3 of Californians will mail in their ballots. Why? You know who you're giving your ballot to? Since these are BLA voters, Jewish voters, BLA voters, Latino voters, Robert Kennedy, my co-investigator, is a professor of law, and he says, this is a crime. This is go to jail crime. He's very emotional about it, because his father wrote the law that made it a crime of voting rights in 1965. This is a crime. He said, Rove should be in jail. He's not in jail. He said, Griffin, his assistant, should be in jail. He's in Congress. Griffin's assistant should be in jail then too. He's not in jail. He's in, well, actually, he's the campaign manager for a guy named Berkeley. Feel better? That's the system. But why? Who busted it? Why isn't it? Why? I've been asked constantly, why aren't these guys in jail if they committed crimes? You know, like especially the right-wing talk shows. Yeah, well, there you go. Well, there was a prosecutor with some real cojones. Captain David Iglesias, U.S. federal prosecutor. He's a Republican, a staunch Republican, a born-again Christian Republican. And he was told, here's fraudulent voters. He said, then he said, go arrest them. He said, okay. So he took the list and he ran all over. He said, he had 50 names today that Karl Rove, the Republican committee, gave him, because he was going to prove that there were these fraudulent voters, right? The fraudulent voters. This is taking the place of the sleeper cell. It's taking the place of the Red Menace, right? The Yellow Peril. It's now the fraudulent voter. Someone suing the Rio Grande voters' school board elections, right? The aliens. Right? So he's looking for the fraudulent voter. And by the way, I asked Dr. Tova Wang, who's an expert in this, said, how many fraudulent voters? She said, more likely that you'd be struck by lightning than vote fraudulently, steal someone's ID and take their vote. I checked, 60 times more likely you'd be struck by lightning than vote fraudulently. Seriously. And so he's looking for the lightning strike, for the fraudulent voter, and he finds none. So the Rove gang says to him, from Washington, from the Justice Department, well, arrest someone. He said, what? Arrest someone. He said, but we don't have any evidence. They said, arrest someone. He said, arrest an innocent citizen? Because they have a Hispanic name. Arrest. He said, well, you can let them go later. He said, it's not the Soviet Union. Well, he made a mistake there. He refused. They fired him. They fired him, federal prosecutor. And the excuse was not that he refused to do an election fix and arrest Americans for trying to vote. It was absenteeism. See, Captain Iglesias was also one of the top JAGs in the U.S. Navy. You would know him because if you look in Billionaires and Ballot, you'll see a picture of the guy who plays him, Tom Cruise, in A Few Good Men. That's him. That's Captain Iglesias. Okay? That's Captain Iglesias. And so Iglesias he was fired for absenteeism. Yeah, he was absent. The commander-in-chief had sent him to Bosnia to prosecute war criminals. So he wasn't in New Mexico, so they said he was absent. And they fired him. By the way, he sued the President of the United States, Mr. Bush, because no employer can fire their employee. And he said, my employer is the President, and he ordered me, and he fired me for doing my job as a soldier. So, there are some people, including some Republicans, who will stand up. But see, they didn't understand it. He said, I thought I was working, with the general. In fact, I was a Sith warrior. I don't even know what that means, but I'm sure it is. Because he wasn't following the money. The money. Remember the diamond mine? It hasn't changed. Okay. What do they want? Okay. Iceman Simmons gave Karl Rove $20 million for his data trust machine. He's going to give him $30 million more. He donated to every Republican candidate to attack the others. He paid for the attack ads of Santorum against Romney, the attack ads of Romney against Gingrich, the attack ads of Gingrich against Perry, and then he paid Perry twice as much to attack everyone and blow himself up to attack himself. Iceman Simmons is putting $70 million into this campaign. One guy. One guy. Why? Well, it's no big deal. He's worth $10 billion. Does he care? No, he's not a Republican either. He thinks they're all nuts. Every one of these billionaires, by the way, except for 35 and 32, are all supporters of gay marriage rights. So what are they doing? Money. Okay. So what Simmons did is he gave $2 million to Perry, knowing that Perry, the more money, the more Perry spoke. Governor Perry, the governor of Texas, he's the smartest bag of rocks, and he makes George Bush look like a road scholar, right? And so he blew himself up, and Perry knew that. So why did he back the loser with the most money? The answer was, because the Iceman's always the winner. He plays on a different chessboard than we do. It's multi-dimensional. You don't even see it. He gave the millions, the big bucks to Perry because he knew Perry would lose and therefore go back to the state house. As governor of Texas, he couldn't give him anything because he was dealing with the state of Texas. He needed something from the state of Texas, but as the presidential candidate, he can load him with the gold. He came back to the state house still loaded with the Iceman's money. His first act was to authorize a waste, the largest waste dump in America, a big hole in the ground in Texas for all of America's nuclear waste, right on top of the Ablala water aquifer. So, fall money. It's not about Republicans or Democrats. It's not about that, okay? It's not about that. Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan? Paul Ryan? Where'd this guy come from? Right? Biggest donor, Paul the Vulture Singer. Who picked Paul Ryan? Who told Romney, who actually said, when he thought mics are off, I wish I could pick Ryan, and who then he made him pick it? His #1 millionaire, Paul the Vulture Singer. Okay. Why? What did Ryan do for Romney? Do you remember? I mean, what did Ryan do for the Vulture? Do you remember that Paul Ryan was the guy who stood up and gave the big speeches against the TARP bank bailout? Who voted for TARP? Only 32 Republicans, including Paul Ryan. It was Paul Ryan who led the congressional debate against the auto bailout. Only a handful of Republicans voted for the auto bailout, led by Paul Ryan. What happened that he grabbed his tiny income? Who made the money? Where did the TARP money go? General Motors spun off its auto parts division, and the auto parts division of General Motors, Delphi, went bankrupt. And a guy named Paul the Vulture Singer, another guy named John the Snake Paulson, another guy named billionaire named Dan Loeb, bought the auto parts division, GM's auto parts division, for 67 cents a share. Okay, fine. Then the bailout came along, and a guy from the owner of the Detroit Pistons, he said, Michigan boy made good. He said, okay, I'm going to save GM, I'm going to save the auto parts industry because Delphi says it's closing, and I'll buy it for Detroit with General Motors and give it back to General Motors with support from the government. So Obama, they all had a big press conference and they announced, okay, Detroit boy is going to buy the auto parts division. And then the Vulture said, no, he's not. He said, what the Vulture said? He said, your car's going to look funny without steering wheels. I said, what do you mean? He said, if we don't, we want $22 a share. And I said, that's a 3,000% profit. He says, I want $22 a share. Or no steering columns, no ball bearings. He had the government and GM by the ball bearings. The Treasury Department asked the president of GM, well, how long can you go without their parts? He said, half an hour. They had none. Kept all the inventory there. They got it. They got their 3,000% profit. The Vulture made just short of $1 billion for himself, $900 million. The Snake made $1.5 billion Okay? They put up virtually nothing. These guys made about $4 billion putting up a couple million. They got billions from the bailout, from Target, and from GM. And then they dropped the entire pension plan. I just got off the phone with the Naylor family of Kokomo, Indiana. Engineer for 36 years with GM in Delphi. Was forced out of the bankruptcy. The pension was dropped. The government took over most of the pension. You and I are paying most of the pension. But it's reduced by 40%. They can't make it. He's working at a grocery store. Family's gone bankrupt, and their home has just been foreclosed. But the vulture got $1 billion. Thanks, Mr. Ryan. That's what this election's about. It's not about stealing votes for an election. It's about stealing this nation. It's about bankrupting and foreclosing on the Naylors. And I watched Robert Pratt family, and I know what's going to happen next to the Naylors. They don't know it yet, and I don't even want to tell them. So I was in Detroit when Robert, and I met with other auto workers, like a member of the UW, Robert Pratt, in the 8 Mile neighborhood, foreclosed. The minute he was foreclosed, something else happened. His vote registration was expunged. Because the Republican Party claimed that if you are foreclosed, you are not legitimately living at your registration address, even if you're in the house. Now, I wanted to see if there was a connection between the foreclosures and the purging, right? This is in Billionaires and Ballot Bandits. I want to see if there's a connection. So I go and fly to Detroit, and I find this big operation called Trot and Trot, like hundreds of lawyers. It's like a foreclosure factory moving thousands of foreclosures through the courts, all this paperwork, and they get fees for this for each family that they throw out of their house. Not that they do anything with the houses. You should go there, 8 Mile. It's just wiped out houses. Within 2 days, all the plumbing's ripped out. The weeds are up to here. The banks don't want these pieces of junk. They just want people out. Okay. Get fees for that. And there's a reason why. I'll get that in a minute. But I go into the Trot and Trot offices. They have given $100,000 to the Romney Billionaire Fund. Restore our Future. They've given this money to the vulture. So I'm trying to see if there's a connection. So I sneak in with my cameraman, Rick Raleigh, also works with Democracy Now!, me and BBC. We go in, we fake our way in, and it was a quick investigation. Because as we're going up to meet the chiefs of this company, trying to break in, we look to the side, and there we see a big door, glass door, inside this foreclosure mill that says, Michigan State Republican Party. It just went from upstairs to downstairs, and you're foreclosed, purged, done. That's how it works. But that's not the end of the story. Remember, I said, follow the money, not the votes. Why are they foreclosing on these houses when they can't sell? They couldn't sell these houses to rats after 3 days. So why? Why not let the family stay there? We know why they don't let them vote. They're all BLA. The answer is the snake and the vulture. See? In 2007, the snake, John the Snake Paulson, walks into Goldman Sachs and says, I have an idea. We're going to sell insurance, mortgage insurance. Great idea, because the Pratts have mortgage insurance, and the Naylors have mortgage insurance. When they lose their job at Delphi and at GM, then the mortgage insurance, if you remember credit union, you should definitely do this. Get the mortgage insurance. If you lose your job, the mortgage insurance pays. This would have saved America. This is where capitalism, like my professor Milton Friedman told me, this is how capitalism should work. This is how it's going to save the planet. They're going to sell mortgage insurance to the people who are facing foreclosure and subprime loans. And so they sold billions. Goldman and Paulson the Snake sold billions in mortgage insurance to European banks. And Paulson said he would be taking out the insurance, putting his own money on the line. If there's foreclosures in America, he'll pay off and save these houses. Except there was one little thing he left out. Secretly, unbeknownst to the European banks buying billions in US mortgages for insurance, putting insurance on them. Every single policy's beneficiary was John the Snake Paulson. Every time a home was foreclosed in America, he collected a check. He wanted those homes foreclosed. He wanted Detroit to die. Vultures feast when people and nations and industries die. That's how these guys make their billions. He made $3.5 billion on foreclosed homes in America. $3.5 billion. No one's made that much money since the Pharaohs. So that's what it's about. Go to BALLOT.bandits.org, where you can download 7 ways to beat the ballot bandits. Here's the poster. This is also at the back of the book. But go to BALLOTBandits.org, 7 ways to beat the ballot bandits. Things you can do to protect your ballot. It is, think of it as the ballot condom, right? So it's safe to go and vote. Okay, safe voting, get your ballot condoms at BALLOTBandits.org. It's also at the back of Billionaires and Ballot Bandits. I'm not going to give you the whole thing because I want you to download it, get it, spread it out, spread it around, you know, protect your friends and family. Like things like, don't go postal. Don't mail these schmucks your ballot. You don't know what they're going to do with it. I do. 488,000 ballots thrown in the garbage because they like the color of your envelope. I kid you not, that's a big one. Even if it's the envelope that they gave you, like that. They did that in Ohio, black districts. They gave people the wrong ballots in New Mexico. Democrats gave the Pueblo Indians provisional ballots, which required a certain envelope. They gave them the wrong envelopes. They said, oh, we're throwing away your ballots because you're using the wrong envelope. Wrong postage. You signed a different name on the outside than on the inside. Suspect signature, you know, Mohammed. Don't count on them to protect your vote. That's your job. Don't say they're all alike and who cares about voting. Because if we keep voting, maybe there will it's not that. Candidates need your vote. We're voters, and if we keep voting, maybe we'll get a candidate. Okay? If we don't vote, they vote for us. They get it twice. They steal the vote, and then you help them steal. Then you hand them your vote. I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. Hell, there weren't even tracks by the time I grew up. Actually, no, they were the trains. They used to come to the Chevy plant in Van Nuys. They also made Frigidaire handles. My father sold Frigidaire refrigerators. My mother worked in the school cafeteria. It was in Chicano neighborhood. And then one day the train came in and picked up the GM plant and moved it south into Mexico. And here it is again. When the Vulture and Snake Paulson took over the Delphi plants and got their billions from us, they then closed 27 of 28 plants in the U.S. They eliminated every single United Auto Workers job, while Mitt Romney, and then they each one of the billionaires, 4 of them, each wrote a check to Mitt Romney for $1 million. After issuing a report that we are glad that we don't have a single UAW member left in North America. That's what it's about. That train leaving with the Chevy plant. I'm not going to let them, they can take the plant, but they can't take my vote or yours. I'll sign all your books, I'll donate for the posters, and I'll see you up there and answer all your questions. And thank you so much.